I purchased a Yaesu FH-2 off AliExpress.com and from Ham Radio Outlet, but the problem is, can you tell me which one is which? Can Yaesu even tell me which one is which? And that is why we're here today. We're going to determine if there's any differences between the China one versus the Yaesu one. After all, the China one cost $50 shipped to me, whereas the one that you get in the United States is roughly around $100 with tax and shipping and everything. And before we move on, I do want to point out that in good faith, I did try reaching out to Yaesu in November 2022 by opening a support ticket, and I never did hear a response. And so I figured, why don't I just give it a shot myself? With that, let's jump into things and start tearing them apart. I like tearing things apart. This is a comparison between the Yaesu FH-2 that I purchased from Ham Radio Outlet for almost $100, I think it was $94 plus tax, versus the Yaesu FH-2 that I purchased off of AliExpress.com for just about $50. And although I suspect this one is completely fake, we are going to compare them today, tear them apart, and see if there are any major differences and which one is the better buy. How could you tell them apart? I hope we can find all of that out. Now, to get started with this story, when I purchased this in November 2022, I did attempt to open a ticket with Yaesu to see if they could tell me any differences in the fake versus the not fake, and unfortunately nobody responded, so I decided to purchase this. It just took a little bit of time. I have, in fair warning, taken this one apart. I think I've unscrewed it before, but for the most part we should be able to get a good gauge of what looks good on here versus on here, or what is completely different versus the two. And we're going to start here with the outer box, because you can tell a lot from the outer box, such as on the side of each boxes. As we could see, optional parts is much bolder on the fake Yaesu box that is on my right, and the print quality is much sharper on the real Yaesu. As we turn around, there are some other differences. Again, we keep that same kind of theme going about how the fake Yaesu box is a bolder font. The stickers look nearly identical, and if I were to scan over the stickers, the UPCs look the same, the AAF 22X001 appear to be the same, the UPC appears to be the same, and they both do say made in Japan. There's not much difference on the stickers. All the punctuation is correct, and with the exception of it maybe being a little bit bolder on the fake one, that's a pretty close one-to-one replica. As we can see, there's still the recycling logo on the bottom of each one. And although optional parts is off-center on the fake box, for the recycling logo, it's a little bit more centered, but still technically a little bit off-center. When we open these up with the fake Yaesu, you're going to see that there's no wrapping and no bubble. I assure you though, when I purchased this 2 years ago, there was. I've just taken this out beforehand. So let us get a look at the FH-2. This one happens to be what I presume to be fake one. And this one happens to be real. Again, I do recall when I purchased it from AliExpress that there was, I believe it was actually pink bubble wrap, so that's good. I don't recall if there was any other printed stuff in there, but for right now we're just going to leave this to the side and focus mainly on the keypads. But on initial inspection, we might make the observation that this one is a little bit more faded. And I say faded, I mean the colors are more dull. However, then again, sitting in a box for 2 years in the garage, maybe that had some kind of effect on it. The overall look of the fake FH-2, what I assume to be fake versus the real one, are nearly identical. After all, they both have white buttons, the words lock on and off, and they appear to be the same font, as we can see here. Both only like a one switch on the button, on or off. The fonts look identical. Even when we get down to the words Yaesu Remote Control Keypad FH-2, those appear to be identical. If we flip it over, let's try to compare the stickers. Now, of course, with the fake Yaesu, you could see that the pads are off the back because I have taken the pads off. The serial number on the fake, or what I assume to be fake, is 1 Juliet 096, and then there's a legitimate serial number on the Yaesu FH-2. The one thing I immediately noticed between the FH-2 and the FH-2 is, again, the font is a little bit different. Like, for example, the font on the what I assume to be fake one is probably just a tad bit thicker, but it's nothing you would ever notice. The word Yaesu is spelled correct on both of them. Munson, Co, period, comma, LTD, period. Those are all the same. I've been going back and forth with myself for hours now. Are they the same font? Are they the same size? And I swear that when I look at that photo I just posted, where it says Sir number or serial number, I swear that the one that I got from China appears to be just a bit thicker in font. But I mean, honestly, that could be chalked up to a difference in the printers that printed the serial numbers, if this was a actual legitimate Yaesu product. And now we're starting to wonder, is this a legitimate Yaesu product? The molding appears to be the same, being that there are these little feet on both of the, what I assume to be fake and real. But here is one difference. Here's a big difference. This is a good thing to know. When we're talking with the suspected fake one, we see heat shrink go almost 2.5, 3 inches high. Whereas on the real one, the heat shrink is a lot lower. It's maybe 3/4 of an inch. The zip tie on this is the quote-unquote fake one, looks almost identical to the real one. And I guess one would argue that they probably are identical. Although one looks a little bit longer, if we stretch them out, they're about the same length. As far as the wire or the cable goes, the cable, well, it has the same feel. Both, I couldn't tell you which one was fake or real by feeling them. They both have the same kind of feel and texture. If we look at the pattern on the TRS jacks, they're identical. There is some marking on this one. I assume this is the real one. Yes, this is the real one, and there is a marking on it on one side that says, oh, I'm going to butcher the name, but they're really well known in cables, and it's Mogami. Hold on a second. And I apologize, I tried to Google it, and it sounds like Moami. But whatever it is, that's a high quality cable that I typically use with my XLRs, and that came on the real Yaesu. If we look at the fake Yaesu though, it also says Japan, and it says the same thing. So far these look to be identical, and one can't help but wonder if maybe the real one was made in China and then shipped to Japan to be finished being made, or put the last screw in, since these look almost so identical. Before I take the screws out though, let's take a look and appreciate the fact that the screws are what I would consider to be nearly identical so far. Three screws will allow us to take apart either of these devices, and we should be able to see a PCB on here. Now, I guess in the PCB, I'm going to look for any unique identifiers or differences in the PCBs. And the reason I'm really doing this is I don't want somebody to pay $100 for something they could have got $50 for, but thinking they were getting a real one. Or if they are all real. All right, we got those three screws off on the real one. We'll just make the first observation here that there's a PCB. And yeah, we're just going to be looking for unique identifiers, anything that might be a little bit different on the real one versus what at this point may or may not be fake. And now that we have them both apart, let's take a look at the screws first. The screws appear to be, you know, as identical as I could tell you.
Maybe the real one's a little bit shinier. There you go, that's a little bit better for focus. But maybe the real one's a little bit shinier on the left. The numbers on the bottom of the PCB are identical. If I was to tell you one difference I make the observation of, it's this PCB on the real one has the break marks from the other PCBs on the right, whereas the fake one has them on the left.
Okay, this is an afterthought, but I wanted to get some better photos in here, and you're really going to maybe appreciate this. Now, I'm not big into injection die and molding, but if we take a look at both of these cases, what I would tell you is, in my amateur eyes, these appear to be from the same injection molding die. What I'm trying to tell you is they appear to be identical in every sense and form. And the one question somebody might have, pardon me, is that right here, there's the circle, and it looks like the clip is touching the circle, but that's actually not the case. It's just the shadow, as we could tell from the rest of the case. But everything even lines up perfectly, and all the markings are all there. If we go on to the motherboard, the PCB board, I would start you off with a bad photo, but we'll get better with the photos. And the one thing I could point out here, actually two things, is if we look at the board on our left, we notice that every time they soldered, they didn't cut the pins off of the bottom of the solder. So it's a poorer solder job, I believe. And the same thing with the white cable. It's a little bit poor of a solder job compared to the white cable on the right. And the last thing I want to point out about these boards and the differences I found was when we look at those 4 dots kind of by each of the wires. For example, right here and right here, the Yaesu, the official Yaesu one, the dots, whatever they are very much so pronounced. I guess it's the letter H. Or maybe it's an M and an M. But regardless, everything else about the boards look the same. In fact, they're the same thickness too. Here is a very, very slightly better photo. The other thing that I guess we could point out is, as we mentioned, the breakpoints on each of these PCBs are on different sides, and the green dot on each of these PCBs are on the same side as the breakpoint. So, hey, it's possible. Well, it's possible that very much so when they make PCBs, there's half of them done this way and half of them done this way. And I know this one's hard to believe, but the font on the fake one is actually sharper on the PCB than it is with the real one. So that's interesting.
I wouldn't concern myself with the tucking of the wire because, again, that might have been something that I did 2 years ago. Quality of the buttons. First of all, we see that the fake one, which is in my right hand that you're seeing now, it is labeled with S1002, S1003, S1004. The lock shows on, lock, and off. There is a no PB logo on here. All of those things are identical to the real one that's in my left now. The quality of the buttons feel identical. You know, there's just not too much more to say. If I was to look at the switches and I was to see that this one says 1 NC and this one says 3 YC, is that a huge difference? N1C versus 3 YC. Maybe this is the only way we could tell if there is a real one or a fake one. There's no other markings on the buttons that would help me distinguish what kind of buttons Yaesu is using versus the fakes. But again, this might be our only hope here. 3 YC versus 1 NC. They feel like switches. The transparency of the boards are nearly identical as well. I will tell you this though, what I'm noticing about the real board, the real board has a transparency. The real board has a transparency that is kind of like a grid square, but it looks like the primary lines run what would be up and down. The fake board, and I don't even know if this will show on the screen, but the primary lines run left and right on the PCB. Up and down, left and right. I guess the only other thing is, do they both work? Let's find that out now. Okay, I thought of one more thing, but I just want to point out that I have these back together now, and to be honest, they're so identical. They use what appears to be the same mold. They look like the same thickness. Now we have the heat shrink wire coming out about the same, now that it's tucked correctly on the fake one. And in fact, I don't know which one's the fake one because I kind of mixed them up. Side by side, I really couldn't tell you. They feel the same, the buttons press the same. And yep, the one on the right is still the fake one, and I know that because of the serial number. And I mean, honestly, looking back at those screws again, maybe I'm just looking really, really close. But now those screw sizes look identical. Of course, the real one, the screws are way shinier for sure. Let's take a look at maybe the one other thing I forgot, which is the overall length of these wires. And they're identical. I mean, let's just kind of point out that they start here and they continue to go on. Sorry for the lack of focus. And they end up here. Provided it works, here I am trying to say, hey, I'm gonna help you spot the fake and not buy a fake or get ripped off, pay $100 for one that was $50. And here, I can't even tell you if they're identical or not. They're pretty darn close. Oh, okay, let me just zoom this out just a tad here. Let's do this. I forgot to weigh things, right? And maybe it's very important for us to weigh things because, well, things could have different weights. This is the real Yaesu right here. And it weighs in at 2.575 ounces. Now, if we go to the illegitimate one, and by the way, none of the feet are on because if I don't have the feet for one, I shouldn't weigh with the feet with the other. But now with the illegitimate one, 2.565 ounces. Wait a minute. Okay, they're identical.
I just wanted to point out it did go back up to 2.575, but that's a very insignificant weight difference.
Okay, starting with what I think is what I thought was fake, but it's probably real. I'm plugged in here. I have the lock on. Nothing works. Take the lock, turn it off, and hit number 1.
CQ, parks on the air. CQ, parks on the...
And then there we go. I could also end that transmission. So basically everything appears to be working. I can hit up and down and the frequencies are changing. I've tested this a little bit more thoroughly and everything's been okay. Let's check out the more real one, I guess we're going to call it now. And this is the more real one. Let's go ahead and take a look here. I hit the buttons, it's locked, so nothing happens. We turn the lock off.
CQ, parks on the air. CQ, parks.
So they work identical.
Wow. As we conclude this episode up, we need to just kind of reiterate that my intentions on this video were not to expose Yaesu or anything like that, but more so I wanted to be able to show you the differences between a fake and a real Yaesu FH-2. And I think what we discovered is the differences are so minor that one could even theorize that that was a production development or progression over time. And I guess if I was to kind of give my thought process on it, I would break it down like this. I did submit that ticket in 2022. I believe it was in November on a Sunday, 2022, where I had asked, hey, could you help me spot the differences? And I never received a response back. I could play that off as maybe they had a problem with their support ticket system that day or whatever. But then I start to look at more details, how the injection molding on the casing appears to be the same. The PCBs are nearly identical. There's like some unique markings on here that are pretty close. And at this point, I actually would have to change my whole thought process on this and say, like, I can't even tell you if it's a fake or not because they're so identical. And I would theorize, this is, of course, my opinion, my thoughts, and my theory, but I would theorize that these were all made in the same factory somewhere. Some of them got stolen and put on the black market. And that's what we're buying from AliExpress.com. And of course, then the legitimate ones were sent to Japan to get the screw put in so they could slap that sticker on that says made in Japan. Where this may become a huge concern is if I go on AliExpress now, there's tons of radios on there and there's tons of Yaesu stuff on there. Will I find a Yaesu microphone? And if people start buying off of these sites like AliExpress and they're getting pretty much legitimate Yaesu products at half price, maybe they don't get their warranty, but then again, if you paid half price, you just buy two of them. You know, this could be a huge problem for Yaesu. So I don't know how to end this episode except like from what you saw in this episode, do you think the Yaesu FH-2 I got from AliExpress.com was legitimate? It's a real FH-2, just maybe stolen and put in the black market? Stop the presses and hold on just a second here because this is going to be good. This is a guaranteed way to 100% definitely almost maybe ensure that you have a real one or a fake one. And again, I'm not affiliated with Yaesu, but if we take a look at what I was talking about earlier, the serial number being 1 Juliet 096, and then we go over to AliExpress.com and we take a look at the serial number that they're using, it's the same serial number. So, you know, that's at least a sign that you probably have a black marketed Yaesu FH-2. Again, if it's still not legitimate, I just wanted to point that out there for you. Heck yeah. Again, trying to keep things respectful. Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you have a good one.